Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. My name is Nick.
I'm Ian.
Today we're going to be talking about some bands that released some really good music, but probably should have been bigger bands. There's a bunch of links down below. Make sure you go check them out. There's links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, for our merch page. There's links for the Spotify and Apple Music weekly playlist that we put together, and also the Patreon page. So make sure you check all that out. Of course, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give us the old thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. Make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time we release new episodes. So like I said in the intro, all these bands have released some great albums. You know, commercially never really got that recognition that they might have deserved, even though they, did maybe get enough on for one album. All these bands have had long careers and are more than just that one album that I think a lot of people think about. One of the first ones that really comes to my mind is the band Local H. This is their album As Good As Dead. This is a band, I think this is their second studio album, but they've gone on to release, I want to say 9 studio albums over the years. And they've released some really great music. It was kind of like the later part of the 90s, so, that our alternative rock sound was changing a little bit. Music was changing, and, even though Local H was doing some really great music, and this is a fantastic album from beginning to end, they were kind of maybe still stuck in that kind of, I don't want to say older way of doing alternative rock. But
well, kind of get lost in the mix, too. I think that's going to be standard with a lot of the bands we're talking about.
Yeah.
They might be doing something really unique to them, and it sounds really good, but it's kind of overshadowed by
a lot of artists
that are doing
definitely.
Whatever's popular too. That has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, and Local H was definitely a band that I think you hit the nail on the head. Kind of got lost in the crowd because there's a lot of other bands that were doing really similar stuff in the late part of the 90s. But like I said, they've continued on. They just released a new album back in 2020, but which I haven't listened to. But I have listened to other stuff from throughout their career, and a lot of the stuff I've listened to is equally as good as this album.
The one that came to my mind, the one band, is Less Than Jake. They've had some popularity, but nowhere near the level that I think they should have had. Yeah. They were on Warped Tour a couple years in a row, I think. But
Losing Streak was a pretty popular album.
Yeah.
The Hello Rockview, which came out after this. This is the 25th anniversary edition of Losing Streak, but Hello Rockview came out after this. That was somewhat of a popular album. Anthem, I think, was a pretty popular album also. Even though
it was probably their last popular album.
Yeah.
It got some play, some recognition. But after that, it was just like they disappeared.
Yeah.
And I think it had more to do with the fact that, as you pointed out before we were off camera, ska was really never kind of a mainstream music form, and they kind of played both lines with like pop punk and ska.
Yeah.
Maybe never really appealing to either side enough, and I think that's probably what hurt them.
Yeah, I think of a lot of those like ska punk bands that really only, there's only a couple bands that really got a lot of recognition. I would say the Mighty Mighty Bosstones, Real Big Fish. Those are like two bands that kind of pop into my mind. The bands that did get like really big and really popular, even though they weren't really big or really popular for either one of them a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
Another one of those 90s bands that, like you said earlier, kind of, I think, got lost in the weeds is Sponge. Their album Rotting Pinata came out in 1994, and they had, I think, quite a bit of success, I think, with this album. I remember I learned about this band from, do you remember the Channel 1?
Yeah.
When we were in high school. Channel 1 was like this news channel that they'd have on during homeroom at the beginning of the school day. And Anderson Cooper actually got his start on there. But Sponge, I forgot. Yeah, she was on there too. Sponge they were on there one morning. I think they played like one track on there. And I had to go out and buy the cassette at that time, after that day. And, I've loved this album ever since. But Sponge is a band that has done other albums. And I think their second album, Wax Ecstatic, I think is as good, maybe if not better, than Rotting Pinata. But the album, I don't think really commercially really kind of went anywhere. And they've done other stuff since then. They've carried on and had a really good career, a lot of really great stuff. But, they kind of got lost in the weeds, like I said, and never really got that big break and never got that recognition that a lot of their peers did from that time.
Another one that comes to mind for me is Rusted Root. I'm sorry I don't have an album cover to hold up for
I'd like to, actually, they've got a couple albums I'd love to have on vinyl.
Yeah.
I never bought them.
they had huge success. I mean, well, relatively huge success with When I Woke, which came out in '94. It was their second album technically, because the first album was kind of just a compilation of EPs, which is Cruel Sun. But When I Woke came out, it had some radio play, they had MTV play.
Yeah.
They were kind of big for a minute. But after that, they still released music, they still perform live, but they never
regained that.
Yeah, and it's more. I think it was. They were kind of like other bands, but they were also not like other bands at all.
I think they had a very unique kind of sound.
Yeah, very unique. And I just think, again, in a similar situation, they kind of got lost in what was more mainstream to a degree, and never really got that full recognition that I think they deserved.
Which is kind of strange because as far as their sound goes, they didn't really have... I don't think they really had like a mainstream kind of sound.
No.
They were doing that kind of alternative kind of thing with a different kind of flair to it.
Very, kind of tribal. Like, the type of music you would imagine a drum circle kind of thing going on. Almost like pseudo or not pseudo hippie. I would say more like modern hippie.
Yeah, which
for the 90s.
There was some of that stuff, but they I think they took it to a different level.
Yeah. I mean, there was rock elements, of course, to it as well. And I mean, I guess they're still around. They don't perform a lot. I know I've been called out on this for saying that they don't perform at all.
Apparently, they play a festival in New York every year.
But their lead singer does most of the shows. He does solo shows.
Yeah.
So, and they haven't released a new album since 2012. I would like to hear more from them. I think they should get more recognition for what they did.
Yeah.
Because I'd say they were slightly more elevated than a jam band like Phish would be in terms of musicality.
Yeah.
I don't want to, poo-poo on Phish.
Don't make Phish fans mad.
Right, but, I think they kind of had similar qualities, kind of a jam band element to them, but slightly more elevated musical abilities. So I think they had the potential to be maybe like the next Phish or the next Grateful Dead, and maybe in some circles they are, but they just never got that mainstream level.
Yeah. Another band that's had a really long career, but I don't think really ever got the recognition that they really deserved, is MxPx, and I've talked about them quite a few times over the last few years. They're probably one of my favorite bands, but MxPx, they were doing that kind of punk thing. Around the same time, the bands like Blink-182 were kind of getting popular. MxPx has been around for 30 years. Actually, this year was their 30th anniversary. So they've got the longevity. This album came out in 2018 was their last studio release. And, when they were in the late 90s, they got signed by A&M Records. And it was right around the same time that A&M was being merged with Geffen and Interscope. And I think during that merge of all those entities that MxPx just kind of got forgotten about. When they released a couple of albums with A&M, or I think it was Geffen Interscope or Geffen A&M, it was the combined label. It was one of those names. It was a combined name, but they released a couple albums through them, and then kind of got tossed aside as the kind of label disintegrated and went in a couple of different directions. And I think it took them a long time to kind of regain any momentum that they had in that like late 90s, really early 2000s kind of period.
Yeah, I mean, they were popular enough. I mean, again, they were another band that was on Warped Tour.
Yeah.
We saw them at Warped Tour in 2000, and it looked like they were getting ready to just really blow up, and just
kind of fizzled out. And well, I mean, they didn't really fizzle out.
No,
the support did. They didn't get the support from the label that they really deserved, and I think it really kind of would have helped had they really kind of pushed the album through the label at least. Well, that's all we got for you today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. Drop us a comment down below, because there's a bunch of different bands that we could have talked about. Even a lot of like newer bands like the Bomb Pops are doing some great stuff that I don't think people are really paying attention to. Get Dead is a band that I think has done some of the best punk rock music of the last 20 years. That's not getting a whole lot of recognition. So there's a bunch of different bands out there, a bunch of different directions. Drop us a comment down below. Let us know what you guys think. Of course, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give us the old thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. That's all we got. Until next time.
Talk to y'all later.
Keep on spinning. Peace.